Around 1177 BC, the world ended. Not for everyone. But for almost every great power crowded around the eastern Mediterranean, the lights went out within a single lifetime. Cities that had stood for centuries burned. Kingdoms that traded gold and ivory across the sea simply stopped existing. To understand how strange that is, look at the world before it broke. For roughly 3 centuries, the Late Bronze Age had been astonishingly connected. Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, Cyprus, the city-states of the Levant. They were rivals, but they were also partners, bound together by trade. Kings wrote to each other as brothers. Ships carried copper, tin, oil, perfume, and worked gold from port to port. Palaces rose with painted walls and deep storerooms. It was prosperous, sophisticated, and proud. And then, in archaeological terms, almost all of it vanishes at once. The most famous culprit has a dramatic name: the Sea Peoples. We know them mostly from the walls of an Egyptian temple at Medinet Habu, where the pharaoh Ramses III recorded a great battle against seaborne raiders in the 8th year of his reign. His inscriptions name a confederation: the Peleset, the Cheker, the Shikalesh, the Denyen, the Weshish. They came by sea and by land, and according to Egypt they had already swept away the kingdoms to the north. Ramses claimed victory. Egypt survived. But it was never the same again. Here is the twist. For a long time the Sea Peoples were treated as the cause. The barbarians at the gate. Now most scholars think they were a symptom. These were probably not a conquering empire. They looked more like refugees, whole communities on the move, fleeing something worse at home. So what were they fleeing? The first answer is written in the climate. Sediment cores and pollen records point to a sharp drop in rainfall beginning around 1200 BC. This was not a bad season. The dry spell appears to have stretched on for something like 3 centuries. Crops failed. Grain ran short. And we have a voice from inside the crisis. In the archives of Ugarit, a wealthy trading city on the coast of what is now Syria, clay letters preserve the panic of the final days. The last king of Ugarit, Amurapi, wrote to a neighboring ruler with a desperate message. Enemy ships had appeared. His towns were already burning. And his own army and navy were stationed far away, leaving the city exposed. Other tablets describe famine and people on the edge of death. Ugarit was never rebuilt. The letters were found in the ashes, some still in the kiln where they were being baked when the end came. It is one of the eeriest snapshots in all of archaeology. A cry for help, frozen at the exact moment the city died. Then add the ground itself. Geologists have found signs that a run of powerful earthquakes struck the eastern Mediterranean between about 1225 and 1175 BC. When faults along a region rupture in sequence, researchers call it an earthquake storm. The pattern fits. Toppled walls and shattered buildings appear at Mycenae, at Tiryns, at Medea, at Troy. A single quake rarely destroys a civilization. But broken walls cannot keep raiders out, and a ruined palace cannot feed a frightened population. Each disaster made the others worse. And this is the real lesson of 1177 BC. The deepest weakness was not any single enemy. It was the connection itself. The thing that made this world rich also made it fragile. Consider bronze, the metal that named the age. To make it you need copper and tin. Copper was close at hand on Cyprus. But tin was rare, and much of it had to travel enormous distances, from sources as far away as Afghanistan, passing through many hands along the road. Now cut those routes. Let pirates haunt the sea lanes. Let refugees clog the roads. The tin stops arriving. Without tin there is no new bronze, and without bronze there are no new weapons and no new tools. A trade shock in one place becomes a military collapse somewhere else. This is how a network fails. Each kingdom leaned on the others for food, metal, and trade. So the fall of one partner pulled at the next. Drought weakened the farms. Quakes broke the cities. Raiders cut the routes. And the whole interlocking system unwound, kingdom by kingdom. What came after was a silence that lasted for generations. Historians often call it a dark age. In Greece, the very art of writing was lost. The script we call linear B, used to keep palace accounts, simply fell out of use and was forgotten for thousands of years. Populations shrank. Grand palaces were not rebuilt. But collapse is never only an ending. When the old empires fell, they left a vacuum, and into that space new peoples stepped. In the Levant, groups like the Israelites and the Phoenicians found room to grow where great powers had once pressed down on them. The Phoenicians in particular changed the future. Their writing, carried on objects like the carved sarcophagus of a Hiram, helped shape the alphabets that became Greek and then Latin. The letters you are reading trace a line back to the survivors of this catastrophe. That is why 1177 BC still matters. It is one of history's clearest warnings about complex systems. A web of trade and wealth can look unstoppable right up until a few shocks land together. Then the same connections that built it carry the failure outward. No single villain ended the Bronze Age. There was drought, and famine, and earthquakes, and raiders, and a trade system too tightly wound to absorb the strain. They struck a connected world all at once. And a connected world, it turns out, can come apart all at once too.